Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio.
I don't have the game wardens out there helping me watch for that, I'm on my own.
$702,000 is sought to conduct a study on the effect that forward-facing sonar has on angler catch rates and fish mortality.
If they're not hunters and fishermen and don't buy a hunting and fishing license, they're not supporting it financially one iota.
Broadcasting on the Sporting Journal Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts or watch on YouTube.
Fish on right now.
Well, we're here at the 2024 Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. And our guest now is Jeremy Smith. I fish, I hunt, and always will.
It's just to look out for your everyday hunter, angler, and trapper that's out there.
A Fish Hunt Forever production. This is Sporting Journal Radio.
All right, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brett Amundsen. That's Dan over there. What's up, Dan?
It's week 670 weeks this show's been going on.
We're going to talk about some other numbers, including a proposed increase in fees for the Boundary Waters. We'll tell you about that coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about some potential research funded by LCCMR. So that's the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. They direct money from the Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund. That is money that comes from lottery ticket sales in Minnesota. We'll explain more. There's a couple interesting research projects proposed to potentially get funding from that, including what is going on with forward-facing sonar, Dan. So we'll tell you more about those coming up, and we've got Richard Sims. So when you hear about what's going on in Minnesota when it comes to potential license fee increases, I know they brought that up when we had that giant budget surplus a couple of years ago in 2023. Just terrible timing on that when you have $17 billion that how should we spend this? Oh, I don't know. Let's do this. Oh, and we're also going to raise fees for hunters and anglers across Minnesota. Terrible idea. Did not go through. Tennessee decided to increase fees and at the last minute pulled it. What happened in Tennessee, and is that something that's kind of similar to what could happen in Minnesota? We'll ask Richard Sims, a friend of ours and a fellow Aglow member, Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. He's been a longtime writer. He's been a game warden, so we're going to get some stories about being a game warden. And there's another rule that took place, happened last year in Tennessee, Dan, where game wardens cannot go on private land anymore.
Jail.
Straight to jail. So,
believe it or not, jail.
How has that affected game management and enforcement in Tennessee? We'll ask Richard coming up later in the show. Joe Henry will join us as well. First, though, Dan, who are the sponsors this week?
Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a trip to fish Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. On X Hunt, see private land boundaries, offline maps, and more. Take 20% off a new membership with code SJR20. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort. Fish Devil's Lake this summer at Haybell Heights. Learn more at haybellheights.com. Tasman Lake Lodge. Catch a world record lake trout and giant pike at Saskatchewan's Tasman Lake. Learn more at tasmanlake.com. Prairie Sportsman, new season is over. You can watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel. And Trails and Outfitters, trophy bear, walleyes, and whitetails in Saskatchewan. Learn more at trailsandoutfitters.com.
That's owned by Barry Prawl. He also is co-owner at Tasman Lake Lodge, where we're spending some time filming another episode of Tasman TV. And headlines are brought to you by Tasman Lake Lodge.
Headlines.
Trophy lake trout and northern pike in a scenic northern Saskatchewan setting. Find out more at tasmanlake.com. Well, the Superior National Forest is proposing increases to recreation fees for the Boundary Waters to increase education and maintenance and to enhance the visitor experience. They're taking public review and comments through September 2nd. So they haven't raised these fees, Dan, since 2008.
Yep.
They're talking about going from $8 to $20 per youth per trip and $16 to $40 per adult/senior per trip.
I wonder how many of the public comments are going to be about the fact that this is coming in wake of or right after budget cuts to a bunch of federal spending. And I wonder how many people are upset about that. But it's kind of hilarious when we dig into that. We were just at the Grand Marais Ranger Station a couple weeks ago, about a month ago now. And it was on one of the days and they were closed. We were still able to get our special permit for them. It wasn't a normal Boundary Waters permit, but we were still able to get our exempt permit. There's still somebody working in there. And the gift shop was closed. It was roped off. I just thought it was very comical how they were still paying somebody to work there. But if I wanted to go in and buy a $50 sweatshirt, I was still in the building. I couldn't for whatever reason, even though there's somebody still working there. So interesting logic, government.
Well, I wonder if they were worried if they had busy times for people trying to get permits, and then they had somebody trying to buy a sweatshirt holding up the line. I mean, for all the time in the world it would take to...
The gift shop will be open during the normal hours. We just were in there on off hours, even though there's somebody still working there. They were closed, in quotes, closed. But for some reason, we couldn't buy it. They had to rope off the gift shop section of the ranger station. Not that I was going to buy anything anyways. I just got a good chuckle out of that.
When it comes to government, I
don't get it.
Throw up my hands. Who knows? The Superior National Forest fee programs provide a source of funding that helps to maintain and enhance recreation sites such as the Boundary Waters. The fee proposal will go back to the National Forest, improving public access and safety, as well as helping to preserve the unique character of the wilderness.
Yeah. I don't mind a price increase. Everything else is getting more expensive to maintain. That should be nothing different. Boundary Waters trips are incredibly cheap as far as recreational trips go. So to increase that by a few bucks, I know it seems, when you say you're going to double it, it seems like it's a lot. It's really not all that much. Especially when you already own all the gear, it's pretty dirt cheap to take a Boundary Waters trip.
So we do a show called Prairie Sportsman, airs on PBS around the region. You can also watch it on the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel. I suggest you check it out because it's probably the greatest show in the history of television. I might have a slight bias, but it's pretty good, I think. And when it comes to Minnesota and the outdoor opportunities and the management behind those opportunities, you'll get to learn a lot more about those. Now, we're funded by LCCMR, which comes from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. That's one of the reasons why we do showcase all the hard work that goes into managing these outdoor opportunities in Minnesota. Well, each year, about $100 million or so is put towards these projects. There's like $1 billion in this Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund right now. It's a lot of money.
Thanks, dumb lottery players.
Whoa.
They're not dumb, but
thank you, lottery players.
You play the lottery.
Yes, Dan.
But get what I'm saying.
So each year, about $1 million goes into a pool, and then a number of different people will apply for funding. And it's a pretty rigorous proposal process. We go through it every 2 years for Prairie Sportsman. It takes about a year to get approval. And then you go through another round of approval, and finally the funding comes out. It's a pretty rigorous process. And I was reading an article in Outdoor News recently, and they talked about a few of these projects that they're going to follow, which I thought were pretty interesting. There's some CWD research. There's going to be some radio collared deer. There's some moose habitat projects. But I thought this one was interesting, Dan. About $702,000 is sought to conduct a study on the effect that forward-facing sonar has on angler catch rates and fish mortality across multiple species. So when people talk about LiveScope is great, LiveScope's the devil, and is going to destroy every fish population out there, you can't base it on emotion alone. You have to manage on some research and data, and the DNR has been doing this somewhat behind the scenes, trying to gather data to figure out, okay, what is actually happening out there before we make a knee-jerk decision. And now potentially this research will also, I don't know who's doing it, where that money's going.
Yeah, I mean that's the weird part with it. Who's doing it? How is it going to be different than what's already being done?
I'm sure we could dig into it.
I'd love to know
who proposed. I'm just looking at some of the headlines. There's also $1.4 million sought to create an Adopt a Flyway program to help some habitat restoration and enhancement of Minnesota's Mississippi Flyway to improve migratory and breeding bird habitat quality. There's some wolf population dynamics research and also bird flu. $234,000 will go toward understanding the prevalence of bird flu in wild birds, which is completely unknown at this time. So some important research, and I'll tell you what, man, that Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund, that kind of money, this type of research, it wouldn't be available. It wouldn't be possible without the availability of these funds. So
go play the lottery. You'll get rich, guaranteed.
Go play the lottery, and thank you for voting to do this, because a lot of good work is being done out there to protect the environment in Minnesota and our hunting and fishing opportunities as well. All right. So we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back, and we got Richard Sims with some really interesting things that are happening in Tennessee, which could be some things that we might go through here in Minnesota as well. And Joe Henry will join us with the Lake of the Woods report, all coming up on Sporting Journal Radio.
Now is the time to start thinking about chasing big walleyes on Devil's Lake. Get on the fish at Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Haybale Heights makes it easy for you to make memories on legendary Devil's Lake with guided fishing and lodging packages. Or bring your own boat and rent one of their cabins on East Bay. Haybale Heights offers a private marina, fish cleaning station, and the opportunity to relax and enjoy your bucket list trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. To book your trip, visit haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com.
All right, now we're going to bring on a fellow Aglow member, Richard Sims. Richard's a writer in Tennessee, editor of Crappie Now. And, man, we've done some trips with you, Richard. Went down to Alabama, saw you in Kentucky Lake, and I've gotten to know you over the last few years through Aglow. And nice to have you on the show here. And there's a few things that have taken place in Tennessee, including a push to raise license fees. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, that license fee increase disappeared. And I want to talk about all of that because fees were recently, raised in Minnesota. It's been a big topic for all of us up here in Minnesota and around the region about who should pay for managing our natural resources and how that whole thing should be funded. So I want to find out how things are done down in Tennessee and about this thing. But first, just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us who you are, Richard.
Well, like you said, I've been a freelance outdoor writer for, since 1985. So I guess that makes it 40 years. And before that, I worked for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. I was a game warden for several years, and then I made the leap from being a game warden to moving into their public relations division. And then I left the wildlife agency because I wanted to return to my hometown. And because of my work in the public relations division, I'd become pretty proficient at video work. So I went to work for one of our local television stations here in Chattanooga and Tennessee, and spent 30 years with them freelance writing. And also 20 years ago, I started a fishing guide business and been running that business for 20 years now as a guide myself. I've semi-retired from guiding myself, but I still book for 8 other fishing guides in our area. So I've been a busy man, and just about all of it in some form or fashion related to the outdoors.
Sounds like a lot. And that's Scenic City, right? Scenic City Fishing Charters? Scenic City?
That's right. Scenic City Fishing Charters in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We fish the Tennessee River. Got bass guides, catfish guides, crappie guides. We've even got a walleye guide.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Speaking our language.
We've got a guy that specializes in walleye in the winter. And he's good. That's a whole nother podcast all by itself we need to do someday.
Are crappies kind of your thing, or is that just something that you have a lot of access to down there?
No, catfish is my thing. I love it all. There's not a fish that swims I don't like to catch, but I love catfish. My standard line is when you get a catfish bite in the Tennessee River, you don't know if it's going to weigh 1 pound or 100 pounds, because it literally can be either one. We catch a lot of big catfish down here, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus pound catfish. I won't say they're routine, but they're not unusual.
Man, those are blue cats, I'm guessing. Do you have blue cats and channel cats down there?
We've got all 3, blue cats,
Flatheads?
Channel cats, and flatheads.
Do you get big flatheads?
Yeah, the flatheads get big. I think our state record's 80-something pounds.
Oh, wow.
Our state record blue cat is 121 pounds. It was just broken about a year or 2 ago.
That's insane. I wish we don't have blues up here. Every once in a while, somebody takes a picture of a channel cat that has kind of a bluish tint to it, and it's a blue cat. And it's like, oh, there's no.
I took one of your good friends, our good friend Scott McInthune, several years ago. He called me coming down here, and he says, "Man, catching blue cats on my bucket list," And I said, "Come on," and
Did he get one?
Oh yeah, he got a bunch. Got some good ones. Yeah, we had a great trip. It was fantastic.
That doesn't surprise me. He's a pretty good angler, and I'm sure you knew where to find him.
Yeah, you could give the guide a little credit. Yeah. It's not all Scott just didn't go down there and figure it out on his own, you know.
A good guide helps.
I give the fish in the Tennessee River all the credit. You know, that's we've got an incredible fishery here. We're really lucky.
Yeah, that is quite the area down there, the Tennessee. You know, I haven't spent time fishing in Tennessee, but we went down and fished on Kentucky Lake. We did 2 trips to Kentucky Lake here in the last year, I guess, one for the conference, and we went back down during the Bassmaster Open and had a chance to learn about that fishery a little bit down there. So, Richard, what was your time as a game warden like down there?
It was fantastic. I mean, it was a great job. And, you know, being a game warden, when I was a game warden in the 1970s, is not the same as being a game warden these days. When I went to work, our training consisted of, we sat in a conference room and they read the law book to us for 2 weeks. And then they gave us a badge and a 38 snub nose and said, okay, go enforce all those laws we just read to you. And that literally, that was the extent of my training when I became a game warden. Now, in the ensuing years, that changed a lot. And of course, now game wardens get the same training as every other law enforcement officer in the world. But you know, I mean, there's an incredible amount of freedom. You know, you woke up every morning, you didn't have anybody that told you what you needed to do or what to do. You know, you decided for yourself, you know, what needs to be my job today, and you went and did it. And, you know, and of course it was also a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, most game wardens' phone numbers were public back then, so it was usually an entire family that was involved in being a game warden because they got to answer the phone calls just as often as you did. And but all that's changed. I could sit here and talk forever about how it's changed. And,
well, it's interesting that you brought up that they get similar training to law enforcement or the same training as other law enforcement now because they are law enforcement. And what we're seeing is that it's been hard to recruit new conservation officers. And a lot of them don't necessarily have an outdoors background. It might just be somebody wanting to get into law enforcement and there's some job openings. So I know I was talking to I've talked to several different people, but over in Wisconsin, when I was over at Horcon, there's actually a program out there that will take new conservation officers out hunting so they can experience hunting potentially for the first time. So it's interesting that there could be some conservation officers out there that don't have an outdoors background.
Yeah, that's kind of scary if you ask me, but you know, Tennessee's a little different in a lot of states, and for a long time, I mean, from the time before I became a game warden in the 70s, Tennessee requires game wardens, or we call them wildlife officers, to have a 4-year degree in wildlife management or a related subject. And so, you know, you not only got to have the impetus to do law enforcement, but you've got to have the wildlife and fisheries background as well. And a lot of states don't require that, but Tennessee does. And you mentioned that they're harder to find, and I had that conversation with one of our, you know, head guys up in Nashville headquarters not long ago that used to be when they'd advertise, you know, hey, we're taking applications for game wardens, you know, they'd get 600, 700, 800 applications. Nowadays, they struggle to get 200 or 300 to choose from, and he's not really sure why, but he thinks part of it has got to do with the fact that you know, public opinion regarding law enforcement officers in general, not just game wardens, but law enforcement officers in general, has taken a beating.
Yeah.
And there's just not the drive, you know, among many young men and women to get into that field like there used to be.
Richard Sims is our guest, and we're going to have to take a quick break here, but I want to talk about a couple controversial things that have taken place in Tennessee, which, one of them in particular kind of, is mirrors in a sense what's been going on here, only it went in a different direction. And then there's something else that happened that was kind of interesting regarding access to private property from game wardens. So we're going to take a break, and then we will come back and talk more about that with Richard Sims. And real quick, Richard, tell me, you do a lot with TV. And a lot of your articles I've noticed are on a TV website. You don't see a lot of TV stations with an outdoor writer. Obviously, that's probably due to your history with that TV station. But they had you on to do something with snakes today?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely due to the fact that I spent 30 years with that television station, and I beat them over the head, telling them there's lots and lots of people out here that care about this stuff. We need to give it to them, and I gave it, I did some outdoor reporting when I was with the station, but after I left, I now freelance for the same television station that I retired from, and that's one of my primary outlets that I write for regularly. You had a back end to that question, which I've forgotten.
About snakes. He did something about snakes on TV.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they have a morning show like every TV station in the country these days, and it's kind of a community-based morning show. And it's part of it's news and part of it's talk about community stuff. And I'm on there, twice a month. I go in and do live interviews, basically about whatever outdoor subject I tell them we want to talk about that week. And this week I said, hey, it's summertime, a lot of people out hiking in our mountains around here. Let's talk a little bit about snakes. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really cool. It gives me an opportunity to help spread the message.
And that's why I don't live in the South. Just throwing that out there. Not a fan of the snakes that can kill you. Yeah, there, copperhead right there. Did you bring a snake in, or did you have props at all, Richard?
No. I just had pictures like that one right there. Okay. No, I'm not a big snake handler myself. The only time I handle them these days is when I find one in my chicken coop up here.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's happened twice this year that I've had to fish a 4 or 5 foot rat snake out of my chicken coop.
Well, rat snake, are those venomous?
No.
Yeah, okay. No. That doesn't bother me so much. It's the copperheads, it's the rattlesnakes, it's the cottonmouths. Those are the ones I'm not a big fan of. Have you ever run into some of those venomous ones?
Copperheads more frequently. They're more common. I have not, as much time as I've spent in the woods and outdoors in the last 70 years of my life. I talked about on TV this morning. I think I've only crossed paths with rattlesnakes 5 times. I can tell you about every one of them because they're unforgettable when you do. But they're out there, I mean, there's no telling how many I've walked by and never knew they were there. But the times I've actually had an encounter that scared me with a rattlesnake, it's happened 5 times.
All right. Well, maybe I'll ask you about those. We're gonna break. We'll come back more with Richard Sims on Sporting Journal Radio.
Sick of eating tag soup? It's time to own your odds this fall with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. Now you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, optimal wind for each stand, tracks, and much more. All at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt and use code SJR20 at checkout to receive 20% off your membership. That's code SJR20.
All right, we're back. Richard Sims is our guest, Sporting Journal Radio. He's with Crappie Now. He also is a freelance writer, member of the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. And we don't have time to talk about all the snake interactions that you've had. And I've got just a couple of stories that just scratch the surface when it comes to venomous snakes. But I will say I don't like them. It's one of the things I don't like being in the South when it's warm out because of the potential for interactions with venomous snakes. But for everybody I talk to, guys like yourself that spend a lot of time in the outdoors, those encounters they're actually fewer and far between than one would realize.
Yeah. I mean, snakes are like any wild animal. They don't want to be, they're in truth as scared of you as you are them.
I don't know about that.
If they can avoid you, they're going to avoid you.
Yeah,
sometimes
for sure.
Avoidance is just laying there in the leaves and staying camouflaged and staying quiet. So, it's not unusual that you would walk by them and never know they're there. Because they don't want to mess with you unless you mess with them. And the fact of the matter is, and I've discussed this with several friends of mine today who have contacted me after seeing the TV segment, is that a high percentage, I can't remember the exact percentage, some, National Health Organization will tell you that, like 40 to 50% of snake bites occur when people are fooling with them, and they shouldn't be, that they could have walked away and left it alone, but no, they wanted to mess with it and play with it, try to catch it, whatever, and they end up getting bit. And the fact I've learned today that I did not know, a high percentage of those people have a substantial amount of alcohol in their blood.
How did I know that's what you were going to say?
And that's a fact. I found it on the internet. National Health Organization's got statistics on it about the percentage of people that get bitten by a snake.
Hold my beer.
The 0.08.
That's hilarious.
So the bottom line is, don't mess with them. A few people get bit accidentally just when they happen upon a snake and step on it or whatever. But most of the time it happens when people are messing with them.
Don't drink and play with snakes. Your
Don't
PSA.
drink and play with snakes.
Well, the one story, I've told this many times, so I won't go into detail, but a friend of mine, Lance Tang, and a camera guy was filming a show for Fox Pro in Montana, and they were walking through CRP. They were shooting coyotes, filming coyotes, and just middle of the day walking through some tall grass. And I think he almost stepped on probably a prairie rattlesnake, I suppose. And it just out of self-defense, I'm guessing, it swiped at him, and they think it caught one fang. So he went to the hospital. They got the anti-venom. Richard, I'll give you one guess how much that hospital visit cost him.
Oh, I have no idea. $15,000.
$55,000. I think that anti-venom was $50,000 or something like that. But that was the same year his wife gave birth to one of their children, so their deductible was met. I think he paid $7 for that hospital visit. So I love that story so much.
It's cheaper than Canada.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into the license fee increase, well, let's just talk about that now, because that was a story that I saw this week on the outdoorfeed.org. You'd written an article, and I'd seen you write about this. In fact, I shared it on the Outdoor Feed a while back, the original article about license increases for Tennessee. And then all of a sudden, now they're not going to increase license fees. Tell us what's going on down there, Richard.
Well, I'll try to summarize it, Reader's Digest version, but Tennessee's like every state. We are almost 100% funded by hunting and fishing license sales as far as the Wildlife Resources Agency. We get the federal Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson money and all that, but as far as taxpayers in Tennessee don't pay anything to support the Wildlife Agency. It all comes from hunting and fishing license dollars. They've been hit by inflation just like everybody else in the world. Their last license increase was in 2015, 10 years ago. The Consumer Price Index has risen, I think, 30 or 31% since that time. And they were getting behind. They were way behind. They were in budget crunch. So our wildlife agency is governed by an independent appointed commission. There are political appointees that govern the TWRA staff. that they're buffered or distanced from the legislative control. And they have the power to raise license fees. This year, they said, hey, it's been 10 years, we're getting way behind, and they voted in a license increase of an average of 28%, just a little bit below the consumer price index increase. But there's one caveat, and that's that the legislature doesn't give up 100% control. So any regulations that the Wildlife Commission passes goes through a legislative committee. And, you know, in my career, 99% of the time, you know, when Wildlife Commission actions reach that committee, they get rubber stamped. You know, they read it, say, yeah, this is what they need to do. Boom, bang the gavel, it happens. Well, this year, it didn't go that way. That oversight committee, and nobody really understands the background. They don't really know what initiated this particular committee, but the committee was strongly and communicated in the meeting with the Wildlife Agency that we think this is a bad idea. We're not going to support it. And rather than let it go to a vote, and, you know, which carries a lot of ramifications to it, the Wildlife Agency withdrew it. But the big reason they were okay withdrawing it, because a lot of these legislators said, we know you need the money. You do good work. You deserve the money, and you need it. We just don't want to charge this small niche of constituents. We don't want to put the burden all on their back, meaning they don't think that hunters and fishermen should pay the full load. So there are several states like Missouri and Arkansas and some other states that have a percentage of a tax. It might be a sales tax, might be a real estate tax, but some sort of tax, and a small percentage of that tax goes to the Natural Resources Department or the Wildlife Agency, whatever you want to call them. And these legislators communicated in that meeting that we are willing to help you get that passed in our next legislative session. So the Wildlife Agency withdrew the license increase. Licenses now are going to be the same price they were in 2015. And the Wildlife Agency is going to be in a budget crunch. There's no doubt about it. They're not going to lay people off, but people who quit or retire, their positions are not going to be filled. They need 25 wildlife officers right now. They say they feel like they need to hire 10 to 15 of them, but they're not going to fill all their wildlife positions. You know, they're going to be scratching and scraping. And right now, we're all just sitting back and crossing our fingers and hoping that those legislators can come through next year and get something passed to get the Wildlife Agency the funding they need from some alternative source other than all of the burden being placed on hunters and fishermen.
Yeah. Well, what we ended up having here in Minnesota is in 23, they proposed a license fee increase because our DNR was kind of cash strapped as well. But the problem was the state had a $17 billion budget surplus. So the timing of that ask was just terrible, regardless of whether most of the people didn't like the idea of the increase, especially when, I don't know what taxes are like in Tennessee, but Minnesota we're taxed enough. And I also don't know what the tourism economy is like in Tennessee, but a lot of people come to Minnesota for the outdoors. So in my opinion here, taking some money from the general fund or some of that, a tourism tax, some of that money and using it to fund some of these things, to me seemed like a better option. Now all that being said, I have no problem with like the user permit model. In a sense, if you're the person taking advantage of these opportunities, I don't have a problem with you funding the majority of it. But if there's someone else or some other business or some other segment of the population that's benefiting from this, like the tourism economy and, the hotels and the restaurants and all of that, which some of these people coming in from out of state, that's the only way these businesses survive. I'm not asking them to pay more money, but you're right. The burden shouldn't always just be on the hunters and anglers. So that's pretty wild. How have other people reacted to the pulling that license fee increase proposal? Were there some people that were for it?
Yeah, sure. You had your diehards that were, deeply ingrained in the principles of our wildlife management system that we have here that understood, they need the money, and they were disappointed that the agency is not going to get it. But most of those people also agree, to your point of who pays, sure, hunters and fishermen probably get the bulk of the benefit. However, our wildlife agency, they manage 1.2 million acres in the state of Tennessee. They own about half of that outright, but through agreements with other government agencies, they actually manage 1.2 million acres. And hunters and fishermen are not the only people who use that 1.2 million acres. You've got hikers, bikers, ATV riders, bird watchers. You've got hundreds of thousands of people that utilize that natural resource. But if they're not hunters and fishermen and don't buy a hunting and fishing license, they're not supporting it financially one iota.
Right. And their gear isn't getting taxed really when you talk about Pittman Robertson and things like that. So a lot of those proposals to try to get funding from those people have come up. But it's so funny when you propose something like that. You get a whole segment of the population that says, oh, here we go. The state trying to take more of our money. We can't even go walk around on our public land anymore without them wanting our money. So much of that is in the messaging. It's almost like our DNRs, need a better PR firm to handle some of the messaging because it's, and they just want to put facts out there. I understand, but it's just the total anti-government, anti-tax sentiment. We're talking about problems for hiring wildlife officers. There's just a lot of anti-government, anti-taxation. We don't want Big Brother controlling our lives, and worse yet, taxing our lives. Right. So it all comes into play. What are you missing out on right now, Richard? Are you missing another point? Got another podcast to do?
I have no idea what that alarm was about.
Is there something in the oven, on the grill?
Yeah.
Food cooking?
The big question right now is, number one, can those legislators pull it off? Can they get something passed through the legislature? There was probably 6 or 8 legislators that spoke up in great support of, we need to find an alternative way to fund the wildlife agency. Well, we've got a total of, 140, senators and representatives or something like that. So 6 of them may have spoken up, but now they have the challenge of trying to get all those 2/3 of those other 140 out there to line up behind them and support them. And those people are going to be getting, when this goes widely public, that, hey, we want to, raise this tax by 0.5%. So that 0.5% can go to the wildlife agency. Well, there's going to be hell to pay for government representatives when that comes up. Mm-hmm. So the question is, have they got the juice to pull it off?
Well, it'll be interesting to watch. It's a volatile subject when you talk about charging people more for something. And you're right. There are people out there that think they shouldn't have to buy a license to go, hunt, particularly if they're eating what they're killing or, catching, things like that. And I understand that, but you have to manage it. You have to fund the management agencies. All right, Richard, before we go, I want to talk about this other thing that happened down there because there's been times where I've been hunting I've been out on public land, or I'm sorry, I've been on private land, and next thing you know, you got a CO popping up in the wheat. Like I've had them sneak up on us, and next thing you know, they're just popping up out of the bush behind you. And I'm all for them being able to, enforce the laws and the rules and regulations. But that's something that can't happen in Tennessee right now, correct?
That's correct. And the quick background on it, and I'll be the first to say, and not many people, even some in the Wildlife Agency, wouldn't argue with me, is that some wildlife law enforcement, this was a mutual effort with federal wildlife authorities, put trail cameras on private property. And this has been now 4 or 5 years ago, I don't know when, put trail cameras. And the gentleman, he had a record as a known poacher, a known violator, and they put trail cameras on his property. He discovered those trail cameras, and he got one of these national, freedom groups behind him that agreed to represent him and take it to court, saying that the wildlife law enforcement officers had overstepped their bounds. I agree with them. I think they did overstep their bounds. The trail camera thing,
that's a bit aggressive.
It took it over the line, in my opinion, and the courts agreed. The courts agreed that no, y'all can't do this. The open fields doctrine is a federal doctrine that most wildlife agencies operate under, that say you cannot go to a man's domicile, the house where he lives, the immediate property around his home, his barn, his garage, and search. But the open fields doctrine said, if I own 200 acres and the wildlife officer needed to protect the deer that are on my 200 acres, he had the right to walk on my 200 acres to make sure that somebody wasn't poaching the deer on my 200 acres. They can't do that anymore. They can, unless they have to get direct permission from the landowner, or they have to get a court order. They can't go on private property anymore without direct permission from the landowner or a court order. You get a call about somebody spotlighting, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, where are you going to find a judge to get you a court order? You're going to go knock on some farmer's door and say, hey, can I go on your property? Somebody said they're spotlighting out there at 2 o'clock in the morning. No, it's just not feasible. The policy, I'm told, that wildlife officers have been given by state attorney's office now is that if they're driving on a public road and they see people out there hunting, we'll take rabbit hunters, for instance. They're driving down the road, they see a whole bunch of guys out there in fluorescent orange with beagles, and they actually observe them in the act of hunting. Yes, they can go on that private property and check those people to make sure they're abiding by the law. But if they can't see it happening from a public place, they can't go on that private property anymore, again, without the landowner permission or without a court order. And in most cases, it's just not feasible. They're handcuffed.
Well, and honestly, I don't know if I have a problem with that, because unless they know of something that's going on, they're probably putting a plan together. But if they don't see it happening, then they don't, unless they've heard about it, or, that's such a tough call. In Minnesota, I think they can pretty much go on private land no matter what, unless they're trying to seize something or search something, then they may need to get some warrants, but they can pretty much go on private land to enforce some of the laws. So that's interesting. How long has that been in place down there now, Richard?
The ruling came down. I mean, first it went to one court, and that court ruled against the Wildlife Agency. They took it to the Tennessee appeals court, and it failed the appeals court. They could have gone on through the Supreme Court process, but they just opted not to. They said, we're not going to fight it. We're going to let it go as is. And I don't know all the politics behind that, but the same thing's happening in other states. I think Connecticut has a similar lawsuit going in the works right now. One of the other, don't hold me to it, Virginia. There's at least two other states that have similar court cases going on right now. So this case kind of set a precedent, in Tennessee that will also potentially influence, have great ramifications in many other states across the country.
Oh, absolutely. I could see that happening. And, you want to respect property owners' rights, but at the same time, you don't want people poaching either. So it's going to be an interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm biased because I was game warden. I walked on a lot of private property. And, it boils down to ethics. Do you trust the people and their intentions out there in the world? And, I want the wildlife on my property protected. I don't want anybody coming in and spotlighting on my property in the middle of the night. And, but as it stands now, I don't have the game wardens out there helping me watch for that. I'm on my own.
Sure. Well, interesting stuff to watch from afar. Richard Sims, I really appreciate the time. Hopefully we'll see you at the Aglow conference in Eau Claire this year. If not, I'm sure we'll see you at one of the Aglow events, or just let's go fishing one of these days. I don't know. We'll go. Maybe we'll come down and try to catch a blue cat.
You know where I live. You need to do it. We need to get that off your bucket list.
You like coming up to our neck of the woods into South Dakota, though.
Oh, yeah.
The Glacial Lake area. You find yourself there a lot. That's not far from us. So,
well, I was up there just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually.
What?
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, what the heck?
I went up there with Berkeley. Berkeley had me up there with a group of riders.
Spirit Lake.
We went to Spirit Lake and toured their facility in Spirit Lake, and then they took us over to northeast South Dakota and to a lodge over there that we spent a couple of nights in that lodge and walleye fished up there, and it was cool. And I come out there a lot duck hunting, and but it was the first time I'd been out there this time of year, so it was really interesting to see all that country that I've prowled a lot during duck season, and got to see it in the summertime. Yeah, it was neat.
Well, if you come over,
I caught my personal best walleye.
How big was it?
28 inches.
Oh, there you go. I'm still shooting for that 30, but I got 28. Was it on something that Berkeley made?
It was.
Okay.
It's on a lure they hadn't even released yet, actually.
Oh, boy.
It'll be released this September, I think, is their release date on it. It's called a Rawler.
Okay. Well, now everybody knows about it. So secret's out.
It's not a big secret. They're they're ready to get the word out on it. But yeah, it was cool.
I was going to ask you about that because I think Brett McComas was down there around the same time, so there must have been some kind of media deal going on, but we can talk about that some other time. But Richard, if you come back through this fall, we're not far from that Glacial Lakes region in northeast South Dakota. That's not too far for us, so if you swing through, we'll do some duck hunting or pheasant hunting or something when you come through next time.
Me and one of my friends, we put our application in again for South Dakota non-resident waterfowl license, and he's already said, I'm going. If I don't get drawn for South Dakota, I'm going to North Dakota. That's a done deal. So you're probably going to see me up there somewhere this fall. It may not be at the Aglow conference, but I won't be too far away.
Well, let's get something planned out. Let us know when you're coming up. We'll figure something out. Richard Sims, thanks for the time today on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
If you want to catch a big walleye, Go where the big walleyes are. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world, with a variety of resorts and lodging facilities offering full-service fishing. Lake of the Woods is also home to sturgeon, sauger, perch, trophy pike, muskie, smallmouth bass, burbot, and more. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods today. Go to lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Now we're going back up to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods. Joe, it's getting to be that time of year. We're starting to look at the backside, the middle to the backside of July. The days are getting hotter. The weed growth is coming up. Walleye fishing tends to get a little bit tougher in a lot of areas. But I'll tell you what, I've had some of my best walleye trips this time of year, July and August, at Lake of the Woods. It just doesn't seem to affect that big lake like it does other lakes.
No, it doesn't. I mean, and the thing of it is too. There's a movement of walleyes that they really kind of head out. Like for instance, on Big Traverse Bay. So for listeners, we have three parts to the Lake of the Woods. We have the Rainy River, we have Big Traverse Bay. The Rainy River feeds Lake of the Woods, and then we got Big Traverse Bay, and that's about 30 miles north by about 25 miles east-west. And the deepest spot in Big Traverse is only 38 feet deep. So it's a great big basin that's full of life, quite honestly. And then, of course, the third area is the Northwest Angle, where the 14,552 islands begin. That's that little tip of Minnesota that sticks up into Canada. Now, let's talk Big Traverse Bay. That basin, there's a lot of mud. The majority of it's big open mud out in that deep part, but there are reefs that pulp out of it. And then, of course, closer to shore, there's sand and gravel in some areas. So it's quite diverse that way. Well, what happens is, as the summer progresses, a lot of these walleyes, especially the bigger walleyes, they'll gravitate out to that deep mud, and they'll live in that deep mud all summer. There is roaming schools of tulipies and emerald shiners, a minnow that lives in the deep called perch minnows. Most people haven't seen them. Not perch, but perch minnows. Of course, there's different kind of bug hatches coming out of the mud. When you hear a bug hatch, you see flies in the air. Those flies came out of the mud on the bottom of the lake in most cases, and they're larvae. And most of the fish will eat those when they're larvae coming out of the mud in the water. And so we have hatches going on. We have bloodworms coming out of the mud. We have crayfish. There's a lot of life on that mud. So those walleyes will gravitate in the summer out to that deep mud. And the big walleyes are going to be out there because they like tulipies. When a walleye on the Lake of the Woods becomes 25 inches long or about 5 pounds, its diet typically shifts over to really targeting tulipies. They like those high protein, oily fish to eat. And we get them big quick too, by the way. Get some walleyes and pike in our lake real big, real fast. But they'll get out there. So that's why that mud is so good. And when you get in some walleyes there, you'll see that on your graph, it literally looks like simulation mode, like you're at a retailer. And they have it on simulation mode when it's on the counter. I mean, it's hook, and then be bait fish, schools of bait fish, hook. And you set up in that, and either you pull spinners or pull cranks through them. You can troll spinners if it's calm. Otherwise, if you get a little bit of wind, you can just drift spinners through those fish, and you can make long drifts of very, very long drifts. It depends on where the fish are at, of course, but you can make some real long drifts and just be picking away at those fish all the way through. And it's a fun way to fish. And you see those fish in your graph. There's no weeds out in no man's land. So you don't have to worry about picking weeds off your hook all the time or anything like that. Those fish are just out there. Some are suspended, some are on the bottom. And if you are one of the people that has a forward-facing sonar and you like live scoping, man, the deep mud is a live scoper's dream. I mean, you get out there and you start search around. There's a reason why some of the tournaments on our lake, I mean, it's traditional that if you can, for some of the pros that come on our lake, it's nothing to come in with 5-10 pound walleyes. And that's because they're really good at live scoping, and they can pick out those great big walleyes and forget about the little 25 and 26 inchers. They get in the way, right? So they can just sharpshoot on those big pigs, and they get her done. But it's a fun lake to sharpshoot because you can see those fish clear, and it's stained water, so they're not running from you so far, and it's just kind of cool. It's fun summer.
I'm sorry, Joe. I'm listening, but I'm also just trying to count all the islands right now.
Well, on a low water year, there might be a couple more. On a high
Google.
Water, a couple less, but 14,552. So when you get bored, you can kind of get in there and have at her.
I'm on Google.
Prove me wrong.
I'm on Google Maps right now. Just counting.
we're watching, so careful what tab you pull up.
Counting. It's insane, and and obviously we've talked about this kind of stuff, and we don't need to go in depth on any of this, but it's interesting that a lake like this is not only in Minnesota but also 2 different provinces as well. And when you think about managing a body of water like that, I mean, there's a lot of coordination that needs to take place.
Oh, there is. Well, and so you figure we got a portion of the lake in Minnesota, about a third of it. Got a small portion in Manitoba. That's Buffalo Bay. And then, of course, there's a great big portion in Ontario as well, where all the islands are. That's the northeast section of the lake. And, a lot of our guests that stay at the northwest angle will slide up into Ontario waters and fish Ontario during their stay. They like fishing amongst those islands. And all you have to do there, Brett, is just get an Ontario fishing license. And you're able to boat into Ontario waters without checking into customs, as long as you don't touch land or anchor or moor or exchange goods or services. So you can go fishing for the day and come back into the United States and not have to check with Canada or U.S. Customs. You got to have a Canadian license. Different rules apply with how many walleyes you can keep and such. And you can't bring any bait from the United States. No live or dead or frozen bait from the U.S. into Canada. There is a place that you can get bait over in Canada if so desire. But otherwise, a lot of people just use plastics and jigs, or they'll pull spinners with a fake worm. There's some good fake worms in the market today, and same thing with pulling cranks or casting cranks like along the shoreline. But there's ways to get it done without live bait. But again, there are options for live bait if you want to fish Ontario waters from Minnesota.
I prefer artificial if I can do it. I don't like having any live bait. And I've got some really nice fish on plastics, even on spinners with some of those fake crawlers as well too. So having a little scent.
One of the things I talk about in my seminars is there are. I mean, Berkeley and other companies have made some very, very good crawlers. Now I know Corey Springle had developed one for trolling with spinners. The one that I have really favor, that I've used in tournaments a lot and stuff, is that Uncle Josh Pork. But that 7-inch crawler, it's like leather, and it's in this juice. It's that hard to get off your fingers, but I'll cut that with a scissors. It's like leather; you can't tear it. I'll cut it in half, so it's 3.5 inches, and that's perfect on a 2-hook harness. You get the 2 hooks covered up with the worm, and then you got about a 2 to 3 inch tail, about a 2-inch tail off that back hook. It's perfect size, and gosh, you can catch 10 walleyes on that one piece of pork, and it doesn't come off. Those are also nice if you are fishing an inland lake and you have a ton of perch or panfish, where they're taking your crawlers off, your live crawlers, and eating them up so quick. They can hammer this thing all day long. I mean, I can remember fishing a tournament on Lake Winnebagosh, and the perch are everywhere, just blooms of perch. And you put a live crawler down, and it's almost like a massage to your hand.
I've never heard it described that way.
I'll tell you what. Hey, their daddy's all excited about it. You got to do a soundbite. He can put it back. He's going to put that up. You don't know how well he will be.
I've fished crawler harnesses on those lakes around Winnie and that whole area for years, and I've grown to just dislike it because of the perch in that area, and it just drives me nuts because of exactly right. You put it down for 30 seconds. So apparently I've had a lot of massages to my hands. I just didn't know it until today. Well,
so I tell you, my old fishing partner Johnny Lund and I used to fish in tournaments together, and we were fishing a 2-dayer there, and we finished third in the 2-day tournament. But I can't remember if we went through. I can't remember if it was 12 or 15 dozen crawlers or some crazy number. I don't know what it was. There was a lot of crawlers. We went through so many crawlers. We brought a lot with us, and we had to drive a long ways to a small resort on some inland lake to buy crawlers for like $6 a dozen, just to keep going because we're running out. I said, man, we got to find another way. And so then I found this product. I heard good things about it, and I started using that. And he stayed with live while we're pre-fishing, just to compare. And I had so much more hook time. He was always coming out of the water, changing and putting a new crawler on. Not only was it brain damage, he was out of the water half the time. And I would notice that I'd go through these perch, and they'd be and all of a sudden, right in the middle of perch, bang, you'd feel that heavy weight swimming away, and you get a nice walleye. And we just gained confidence in that, and it was much, much more efficient. So my rule of thumb is I do like using live crawlers as much as I can when I'm pulling spinners. But I'll tell you what, if I'm pulling in through a whole bunch of perch and panfish, maybe sunnies and stuff, I'll put on the fake worms. The other situation is when I'm pulling through weeds. When you're pulling through weeds, maybe you're using a bottom bouncer, maybe you're using a bullet weight and casting it out away from the boat. But when you're pulling through weeds, if you get hung up in a weed and you got to snap it out of there, you never know if your crawler's on there because your crawler can come off when you snap it. But if you have something artificial on, like that Uncle Josh pork as an example, you know it's on there. You snap it out of that weed. Man, that's a lot of times when you get hit.
Joe, we don't talk about it very much, and you brought up fishing in Ontario, and I just wanted to touch on this for a second. I don't know how many people go fish that little chunk of Manitoba water over there, but I'd assume it'd be a very similar situation.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Buffalo Bay is a beautiful area, and it's very good fishing in there. There's a big, if you look at a lake map, there's a big, long, like a rock reef that goes for a long, long ways. It looks really cool, and it's great. It's just a small piece, though. It's on the very north west corner of Lake of the Woods here. And it's just a very, very small piece of the lake, and I think that's why people don't fish it quite as much. Now, people that do go to Buffalo Bay and they stay over on the Manitoba side, I think they love it. And there's a nice resort over there, and it's a beautiful area. Most of the people that come to Lake of the Woods, I think, are going to fish the Minnesota part of it. And again, if you're going up to the northwest angle, typically it's those guests, because you're really, Ontario from the northwest angle is a long cast off the dock, basically. I mean, you can see Ontario almost everywhere you're at when you're up there, and that's why they do it. They say, geez, for me to be able to get amongst the 14,000 islands, maybe you see a boat or two all day. Of course, the wildlife, the beauty. If it's real windy, you can always duck behind an island. I mean, it's a pretty special place. And so a lot of our guide trips out of the northwest angle throughout the summer, Brett. I mean, I bet most of our guide trips out of the angle, they're taking their customers for truly an adventure up in Ontario. And of course, a lot of those guides up there, they'll do shore lunches and stuff too on an island. And it's some of the best fried walleye with all the fixings you'll ever have is from a guide who does it almost every day up on an island. It's pretty cool.
It's a neat area, and so much history up there. I've had a lot of people bring up that episode of Prairie Sportsman we did, where we took the history tour up there. It was pretty cool. So people
that was the Lighthouse Boat Tours with Joe Lauren. We always tell people, hey, if you're heading up north, if you're not a hardcore angler and you don't want to fish every single day, take one day and go with Joe Lauren, and he'll take you and show you the abandoned gold mines, abandoned POW camps, petroglyphs. He'll show you the Fort St. Charles, a lot of the history, Massacre Island. There's so much to see up there. The other thing people like doing is they can get in with either a fishing guide, or Joe Lauren will do this too. Or, quite honestly, Brett, we even have a new deal now. I should mention this. Our Lake of the Woods passenger service. So if you drive to the northwest angle by automobile, you will go through 40 miles of Manitoba and then re-enter into the United States. You need credentials. But, it's kind of cool. Our Lake of the Woods passenger service, which is our charter boat service from the south end of the lake, that basically transports guests up to their favorite resort at the northwest angle, and they'll transport you back. They keep you in Minnesota waters, so you don't need any credentials, and they'll take you by boat. It's beautiful. They're starting to do tours now. Well, they'll take you and show you different spots within Canada. They'll take you up and show you Fort St. Charles, the buoy, the northernmost point buoy at Jerry's. They also have one trip, as some of the guides do in the northwest angle, where on Wednesdays they got a fresh farmers market right at the public harbor in Kenora, Ontario. And they'll take you the 40-mile trek through 14,000 islands, and they'll take you to a fresh farmers market up in Kenora there. They got food and beverage and fresh stuff and arts and crafts, and it's a cool day. And then they bring you back. You can fish your way back, or they'll just tour you back. And again, you can do that from the Rainy River. You don't even have to go to the angle to enjoy some of those tours. So that's the Lake of the Woods passenger service. We talked about Joe Lauren up at the angle. He does the Lighthouse Boat Tours. And even some of our fishing guides, they'll take people to Kenora, and maybe they go up and do the farmer's market, or go up and grab a beer and a sandwich, and then they'll fish them back in the afternoon. Yeah. A lot of options. It's
pretty
fun.
Cool, for sure. All right, Joe, well, if people want to plan a trip to Lake of the Woods, what should they do?
Hey, check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.